For decades, owning a home has been one of the biggest symbols of the American dream. But things have changed. Home prices are still high, mortgage rates remain elevated, while rents in many cities are finally starting to cool. The question is no longer, can you buy a house? It's, should you buy one right now? Today, we're going to run the real numbers together. And what we find might completely change the way you think about one of the biggest financial decisions you'll ever make. If you enjoy data-driven personal finance and real-world financial analysis, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming videos. Meet Daniel, a 32-year-old software engineer living in Cleveland, Ohio. In 2026, Daniel made a decision that surprised a lot of people. He chose not to buy a home, even though he could easily qualify for a mortgage. It wasn't simply because of inflation, high home prices, or elevated mortgage rates. In fact, Daniel comfortably met the 28-36 rule that many lenders use to evaluate borrowers. But he cared about something far more important: the numbers that would shape his everyday life after buying a home. Daniel is currently single and earns $95,000 a year, which works out to about $7,917 in gross monthly income and roughly $6,000 in take-home pay after taxes. He has a credit score of around 750, always pays his 2 credit cards in full and on time, and is still making payments on his student loan. On the other hand, he doesn't have a car loan, giving him more flexibility in his monthly budget. Over the next 2 years, Daniel plans to get married. That's exactly why he's taking homeownership seriously now. He's carefully evaluating whether buying a house is the right move, knowing that once he starts a family, he'll also want to purchase an SUV. After spending weeks researching the U.S. housing market, Daniel came to one clear conclusion: homes still aren't cheap. The median price of an existing home across the United States is now around $440,600, while the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate remains close to 6.5%. That means even if home prices aren't rising as quickly as they were a few years ago, the monthly cost of owning a home is still significantly higher than many buyers expect. But when Daniel looked at the rental market, he saw a very different picture. New apartment supply has been increasing, giving renters more choices and helping stabilize rental prices. The average rent nationwide is currently around $1,950 per month, and rent growth has slowed considerably compared to the rapid increases seen over the past few years. That made Daniel stop and think. If I can still rent a place that fits my lifestyle for a lower monthly cost, why rush into a 30-year mortgage? Daniel decided to narrow his search to the place he already called home: Cleveland, Ohio. Compared to many major U.S. cities, Cleveland is still considered one of the more affordable housing markets. Daniel wasn't looking for a fixer-upper. He wanted a 2-bedroom, single-family home in a safe neighborhood, one that would be suitable for starting a family in the near future. After days of searching, he found that homes matching his criteria typically cost around $280,000. On the other hand, he could continue renting a comparable apartment or house for about $1,500 to $1,800 per month. The gap between today's rental cost and the long-term cost of homeownership made Daniel take a step back and think more carefully. He realized the question was no longer, can I afford to buy this house? The real question was, does buying this house actually fit the life I'm planning to build over the next several years? A friend suggested that Daniel calculate how much house he could realistically afford using the 28-36 rule, a guideline that most U.S. mortgage lenders use when evaluating home loan applications. With an annual salary of $95,000, Daniel earns about $7,917 in gross monthly income. Under the 28% rule, he should spend no more than $2,217 per month on housing expenses. That includes principal and interest, property taxes, homeowners insurance, and private mortgage insurance, PMI. The 36% rule looks at the bigger picture. It says Daniel's total monthly debt payments shouldn't exceed $2,850. Daniel doesn't have a car loan, and he always pays his credit card balances in full each month. However, he's still making payments on his student loan, which means those payments are also included in the lender's debt-to-income calculation. To see how the numbers would work in real life, Daniel looked at a $260,000 single-family home. He assumed a 10% down payment, or $26,000, leaving him with a $234,000 mortgage on a 30-year fixed loan at 6.5%. After entering everything into a mortgage calculator, here's what he found. Principal and interest, about $1,478 per month. Property taxes, about $433 per month. Homeowners insurance, about $120 per month. PMI, about $95 per month. That brought his total monthly housing cost to approximately $2,126. Daniel compared that number with the $2,217 housing limit under the 28% rule. Technically, he was still within the recommended range. Even after including his student loan payment, his total monthly debt remained below the 36% debt-to-income limit, meaning he would likely qualify for a mortgage. Daniel's income was high enough to qualify for a mortgage, but he didn't stop there. He understood that banks look at your gross income, while your daily life is determined by what actually lands in your bank account after taxes. If he bought the $260,000 home, his monthly housing costs would come to about $2,126. Daniel did the math. $6,000 in take-home pay minus $2,126 leaves about $3,874 each month. At first glance, the numbers looked reassuring. Daniel could afford the house. His parents kept telling him, rent is just throwing money away. A few of his friends had a different concern. If you don't buy now, home prices will keep going up and you'll miss your chance. Even the real estate agent kept reminding him, mortgage rates could go even higher. This might be the best time to buy. Daniel understood that none of those opinions were unreasonable. They were all based on real concerns, and everyone was trying to give him what they believed was good advice. But he also understood something even more important. No one else has to live with his monthly mortgage payment except him. At first glance, that seemed perfectly manageable. But instead of stopping at the numbers, Daniel looked at the life he was already living. His apartment wasn't luxurious, but it met everything he needed. It was only a 20-minute walk to work, and within a few blocks, he had access to a subway station, bus routes, and a grocery store. Most days, he didn't need to drive anywhere. That meant no car payment, no gas, no auto insurance, and no parking costs. Instead, that money could go toward goals that mattered more to him. Every month, Daniel paid $1,400 in rent. As soon as his paycheck arrived, $600, about 10% of his income, was automatically invested into his long-term investment account. He also set aside $500 each month to build an emergency fund in case of job loss or unexpected expenses. On top of that, he spent about $2,300 a month on everyday living expenses, including utilities, electricity, water, and gas, about $180, internet and cell phone, about $120, groceries, about $550, health insurance and medical expenses, about $350, public transportation and occasional Uber rides, about $150, dining out, gym membership, and entertainment, about $450, clothing, personal purchases, and miscellaneous expenses, about $500. Looking at the full picture, Daniel realized he had built a financial system that worked well for his current stage of life. Even with the rising cost of living across the U.S., he was consistently investing, growing his emergency fund, and maintaining a lifestyle he genuinely enjoyed. Then, he changed just one number. Instead of paying $1,400 in rent, he replaced it with $2,126 in monthly homeownership costs. That single change increased his monthly expenses by roughly $700 to $800, and that extra cost had to come from somewhere. It could mean investing less each month, slowing down the growth of his emergency fund, or giving up part of the lifestyle he had worked hard to build. Not to mention, within the next 2 years, Daniel planned to get married and eventually finance an SUV, adding another fixed monthly payment to his budget. He also thought about something that rarely shows up in a mortgage calculator. As a renter, if the air conditioner stopped working, the roof leaked, or the water heater failed, he simply called the landlord. He didn't have to spend his weekends dealing with repairs or worry about unexpected maintenance bills. That's when Daniel realized something important. He wasn't choosing to keep renting because he couldn't afford to buy a house. He was choosing to keep renting because he didn't want a mortgage to slow down the goals that mattered most: building a family, growing his career, and continuing to invest in his future. For Daniel, at this stage of life, flexibility was worth far more than owning a home too soon. Cleveland had been a great place for Daniel to start his career. The cost of living was relatively low, rent was affordable, and it allowed him to save money every month. But deep down, he knew Cleveland wasn't where he wanted to spend the rest of his career. As a software engineer, Daniel also knew that salaries in Cleveland were significantly lower than those in America's major tech hubs. So instead of putting every available dollar into a house, he chose to invest in what he believed would generate the greatest return: himself. Every year, Daniel set aside about $2,000 for professional development, including technical courses and industry certifications. He believed that your greatest asset isn't the house you own, it's the value you bring to the marketplace. At the same time, Daniel and his girlfriend began preparing for the next chapter of their lives together. Part of his monthly income went toward a wedding fund, building a financial cushion for their future family, and preparing for the major life changes they expected over the next few years. But Daniel's girlfriend had concerns of her own. She knew Daniel wanted to move to San Francisco within the next few years to pursue better career opportunities. At the same time, she worried that continuing to rent might delay their ability to build a stable life after they got married. It's a dilemma many young couples across America face today. Do you buy a home now for the sense of stability, or keep investing in your future before making a financial commitment that could last for decades? Daniel had already made up his mind. Before turning 40, he wanted to relocate to San Francisco, the heart of America's tech industry. His plan was to move there first on his own and rent a room in a shared apartment for around $1,000 to $1,500 per month. He wasn't looking for luxury or extra space. His priority was simple: put himself where the opportunities were bigger, the salaries were higher, and his career could grow faster. Once his career was established and his financial foundation became stronger, his family would join him. To Daniel, that was the best way to provide stability for his future wife and children while continuing to build his career over the next 15 to 20 years. For Daniel, buying a home wasn't the first milestone. It was the reward for reaching the right one. His first priority was building a career and a financial foundation strong enough that when the time finally came to buy a home, he would never have to choose between owning a house and living the life he truly wanted. Because in the end, a home should be the result of financial freedom, not the obstacle that keeps you from achieving it. In the end, Daniel decided not to buy a home, not because he couldn't afford one, but because he knew it wasn't the right time. He understood that the pressure wouldn't simply disappear. Every month, he still had rent to pay, a student loan to finish, an emergency fund to build, investments to make, and a future marriage to prepare for. He also accepted that home prices might be even higher a few years from now. But Daniel chose the challenges that would move him forward, instead of taking on a mortgage that could slow down the goals that mattered most of all. He realized that buying a home should never be driven by the fact that a bank is willing to lend you money. It should be driven by whether that home fits your cash flow, your long-term goals, and the life you're trying to build. Because in the end, the most valuable asset you'll ever own isn't your first house. It's your ability to keep growing, increasing your income, and creating more value throughout your life.